Gist of Sant, the yoga of the sound current, a brief statement of the Sant system of spiritual science. Sant, or the teachings of the saints, the new psychology. This little volume is in the nature of a personal testimonial to one of the greatest of masters. After 26 months in daily personal association with him, and of the most critical study it is possible for a scientifically trained man to make of another human being, the writer sends out this testimonial with the utmost confidence that he is bearing witness to the mastership of one of the greatest, if not the very greatest, of all Mahatmas who have ever graced this world with their loving presence. The Master critically studied. While the author's love for the Master has become the dominant factor in his life, it is believed that this love has in no way biased his estimate of the Master. He has shut his eyes to no facts which could be discovered. He has sought for evidence, both for and against. He has weighed in the balance carefully all points. He has watched keenly every little incident of the Master's life. He has carefully studied the Master's reactions under all circumstances, extending from his enthusiastic reception by multitudes of 10,000 to 15,000 people down to a personal attack by a hostile critic. He has watched the Master while talking, eating, sleeping, walking among crowds and climbing mountains, travelling in motor cars and railway trains, and horseback riding. He has watched people worshipping him with the profoundest adoration, and he has seen others abusing him and seeking arguments with loud and bitter denunciations. He has seen the Master at the bedside of the sick and dying, and at the funeral pyre of the dead. He has seen him enter and has followed him into the hovels of the poor, and he has gone with him into the mansions of the rich. He has witnessed many occasions when large numbers of prominent men, such as lawyers, doctors, judges, college professors, and even Rajas and their Ranis, have all sat at his feet with rapt attention. He has watched the Master carry on his heavy daily duties in the sweltering heat of summer, and he has stood by him in the chilling winds of winter, noting how calmly he meets all conditions and works on tirelessly. In all things, under all circumstances, he has never seen the Master at fault, so far as he could tell. He has never seen the Master exhibit any of the ordinary weaknesses of common men. As a man, the Master is perfect, so far as 26 months of careful observation can determine. And as a Master, the preceding pages tell their own story. Some astounding facts. One of the most astonishing things connected with this science is the fact that it has no priest, no dogma, no ritual, no ceremony, and nothing to be believed without evidence. Its entire structure is based upon positive knowledge which any student may demonstrate for himself. This is almost beyond the conception of the Western student, accustomed as he is to mere beliefs in matters of religion. But the fact is that this is not a faith or a religion in the ordinary sense of those terms. It is strictly an experimental science, just as much as is chemistry or any of the applied sciences. Another astounding feature of this system is its psychology. If you will turn to your standard dictionary, you will read that psychology is the science of the mind or soul and of its functions. The science is thus confused at the very outset by using the terms soul and mind synonymously. The word is taken from the Greek, which means soul, not mind at all. But many modern students and writers on the subject know no distinction between the two. At best, they consider the mind but a function of the soul. Some others deny the soul altogether, and a few even question whether there is a mind at all, aside from the physical brain and its functions. Most modern writers make psychology almost purely a science of the mind. They have thus usurped the name and given it a significance which Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates never dreamed of. To them all, psyche was that beautiful divine spark which never experienced death, even though all else might perish. Now, it must be evident that any accurate science of psychology must deal with both mind and soul. And this is exactly what the science of the masters accomplishes. It is therefore the only exact psychology. And if we were to give this science an accurately descriptive name, it would be the psychology of the masters. In this system, then, ethics would become but a subdivision of the great science of the soul. If only the Western student could grasp this stupendous fact, his psychology would enter upon a new and glorious era. But one thing which will astonish the Western student, and may possibly at first be difficult for him to concede, is the fact that the mind and the soul are two distinct and separate entities. The mind itself is material, of course of a very highly refined order, but the mind has no independent self-consciousness. It cannot function alone, being wholly dependent upon spirit to activate it. It is no more a part of the essential being of man than is his body. The mind is only another instrument which the soul utilizes for its contacts with material planes of life. When in the course of its development and ascension to higher regions, it transcends the realms of matter, it discards the mind as of no further use to it, just as it discards the physical body when it leaves this plane. Strange as it may sound to the Western student, the individual spirit is freer, happier, and wiser when it no longer has any mind to encumber its activities and limit its perceptions. This may sound like utter nonsense to the student trained in the ideas of the West, but it is a fact, nevertheless, which every student of this science may and does prove for himself as he advances to higher regions. He does not prove this by any reasoning process, but by actual demonstration and personal experience. There comes a time when he literally lays aside the mind and discards it entirely, leaving it behind as an instrument which he no longer needs and which is more or less cumbersome as the body is. From that time on, the spirit or soul knows all things by direct perception, and the range of its perception is vastly increased. But that can happen only when the soul has entered the realm of pure spirit and has left the regions of matter far behind. Some of these ideas may be quite unthinkable to the Western mind. They will probably think that I have at least mislaid my own mind, if I have not entirely lost it, when I set out to make this statement. But that is because their minds are full of the old misconceptions. My only purpose here is to state that this science offers to the world a new psychology, which is at the same time the oldest psychology on earth. For it has been taught by all of the masters of the East for countless ages. The problem of evil solved. Another astounding thing about this science of the Masters is that it offers for the first time in history an adequate solution of the problem of evil. That is to say, in all history, this is the only solution that has ever been offered which satisfies the demands of both reason and fact. Around this problem, wordy battles have been fought ever since man began to think. Mountains of books have been written, but the books have been mostly efforts to fit the facts into some preconceived theory, with the inevitable result that the problem was left just where it was before, only perhaps a bit worse confounded. Many a poor student has wrecked both character and reason on the rock of this gigantic problem. Others have given up in despair, forced to the conclusion that there can be no such thing as a just God in the universe. For the student can never reconcile the existing conditions of life here with the idea of a beneficent, all-wise and all-loving Creator in charge. He may, indeed, shut his eyes to the facts and end up, like the Puritans of old, by rejoicing with his God over the tortures of the damned in hell. Otherwise, he can hardly find a solution that satisfies his conscience. Some have taken to another alternative, quite as absurd, and have denied the very existence of evil. In a broad and metaphysical sense, the latter concept is quite true, but it must be understood to be true only in the sense that whatever system the Supreme Father has instituted must be the best, and in the end makes for the highest good of all. But to deny the existence of what men term evil in this world, involving pain, sorrow, and death, is manifestly to shut one's eyes to the facts before him. Now here is a science which offers a perfect solution of the problem. The key to its solution lies in the fact that this world, the entire physical universe, was created and is now ruled over, not by the Supreme Lord of all creation, but by a subordinate who is himself imperfect. Hence, if you are forced to the conclusion that the Creator and Lord of this world is not and cannot be all love and goodness, you are quite right. But if you say that this is only pushing the question back a little and does not offer a final solution, we still reply that the system has been established by the all-wise Supreme Will, and is the best possible system for the fulfillment of the Supreme Will. This world is a theatre of pain and struggle and death, and it is necessarily imperfect from the standpoint of our immediate happiness. So is a jail, a reformatory, or a hospital. The fact is that this world is not and never was intended to be a place of unmixed happiness. It was never meant to be so. The Lord of the region, himself being imperfect, finds it his primary business to keep souls here as long as he can and subjugate them until they learn enough to seek a way out. And that was what he was put in charge of this region for. When men reach this stage, they have accomplished their periods of discipline. Their evolution here is finished, and they are ready for advancement to higher regions. The purpose for which they were originally sent into this region of sorrow and pain has been fulfilled, and the Supreme Lord of all is prepared to give them a royal welcome back home. That the great Supreme Father is infinitely higher and better than the Lord of this physical realm is a concept wholly new to most Western students. And yet the Lord of this region is carrying out the beneficent plans and purposes of the Supreme Father. This theatre of action had to be a very imperfect place from the viewpoint of the present happiness of its inhabitants, in order to carry out the work for which it was instituted, and so it required a ruler over it, who was himself imperfect, for his work would not be congenial to a perfect Lord. So the Supreme Father made good use of him for the execution of his own gracious ends. In other words, this world is a sort of prison in which we find ourselves temporarily placed. The inmates of the prison being so imperfect, we could not expect a perfect keeper of the prison. And so the keeper of this great prison is not perfect by any means, and yet within the confines of his domains, he is the Lord God over all, and most people do not know of any God above him. If some people, well situated, think this old world is a pretty good place to live in, it may be a wholesome thing for them to know that this world at its best, when compared with even the lowest plane above, is nothing more than a dirty outhouse, so great and multiform are the mansions which the Father has prepared for those who earn the right to enter them. Now when men learn wisdom, when their discipline or self-control is complete, they will naturally seek a way out, and that means they will search for a master. He is the great liberator, and he alone has the key to unlock the prison doors and set us free. Why was the matter placed in his hands? I do not know, but it was the plan of the Supreme Father, and it must be the best way, for his infinite wisdom and love would not fail to do the best thing for his children. In this connection, one extremely suggestive fact presents itself to the student. It is this: vanity or egotism is the chief thing that blocks the return of the soul to God, and the Master offers the only cure for that terrible evil. If there were no other reasons why individual redemption has been placed in the hands of masters, that one alone is quite sufficient. When the soul places itself at the Master's feet and surrenders all to him with a readiness to follow him implicitly, that means the death blow to egotism. From that day forward, love and sweet humility open the doors to the regions of light. If, however, the liberation of the soul and its spiritual exaltation were left wholly in the hands of the individual himself, every step he would take toward his goal, he would become more and more vain of his achievement. This growth of vanity would then act as an automatic stop to all further progress, making self-liberation practically impossible. And this is exactly what always happens to those who endeavour to climb the heights by their own unaided efforts, i.e., without a master. We may also add that the task of individual liberation from the bondage of earth and from the slavery of the five foes is utterly beyond the powers of the individual. He cannot accomplish the task alone. No one can do it. The resources at his command are altogether too limited. He must have help. And so the Supreme Father has determined that the living Master shall be the helper, the guide, and the liberator that man needs. Substitutes in religion. It seems important to call attention here to one other thing. In their wholesale abandonment of the Church during the last half-century, many cultured and thinking people have turned toward some sort of convenient substitute, such as New Thought, spiritualism, Christian Science, Theosophy, and Rosicrucianism. Not a few have turned back to the ancient Vedas, and many also have taken to Buddhism. The high and noble precepts of the great prince have appealed to many. As an ethical system, it is far superior to the ethics of the Bible. Only the Sermon on the Mount, given by Jesus himself, stands out as equal or comparable to the Eightfold Path of Buddha. If we could get the real teachings of Jesus, we might have a very fine system of moral philosophy, and perhaps some hints as to the method of the inner path. But it is practically impossible to secure anything direct from the great Son of Mary. He wrote nothing himself, and his teachings have been obscured by his disciples, and miserably interpolated by others. But to those students of Buddhism in Europe and America, it is only necessary to point out one thing. They may have an all-sufficient moral philosophy, but the system is lacking a living master. It is therefore like picking up beautiful shells by the shores of some ancient sea. They are beautiful to look at, but they are lifeless. Nowhere in the teaching of modern Buddhism, either in the northern or southern school, or in any of the many sects subdividing them, do they give you a clue to that power which alone can free you from spiritual bondage. They do not teach you how to go inside and find for yourself that kingdom of heaven spoken of by all the world teachers. Neither do they offer you any help in overcoming the downward sweep of the great currents of evil. They tell you what you ought to do, but they leave it all for you to do alone, and they are careful not to give you the exact method by which the gigantic task is to be accomplished. They point you to Buddha or to Christ as examples, but nowhere do they tell you exactly how you yourself can become another Buddha or another Christ. They actually tell you in substance, go on trying to be like him, but of course you cannot do it. It is much as if you were down in a deep well, its cold waters cramping your muscles, and someone yells to you that you ought to get out of the well. You know that already, without doubt. But he offers you no help or definite information as to how to go about getting out. In such circumstances, what benefit is it if a minister in a Prince Albert coat and white necktie stands at the top of the well and reads to you a beautiful sermon? All of these beautiful ethical systems tell you what you ought to do, and then they stand by and watch you go on down to hell. They offer you a charming system of moral philosophy, and in fact most religions are but little more than that. And when you have committed them to memory or tacked them upon your wall, you promptly forget them and go on following the 5 evil passions down to your grave. They all lack the dynamic force you need, and that is to be found only in the Master, the living Master, the one now in the human body. The one who has finished his work here and has gone is no longer able to help you. Those who look to such a master only draw upon their own imaginations for help. The living Master alone can render the needed assistance, and that is exactly the supreme value of his science. It not only definitely points the way, but it extends the help of the Master at the critical moment, and he is abundantly able to liberate all who take shelter at his holy feet. No soul, no God in Buddhism. The Buddhist teaching is further weakened by its denial of the individual soul and of a supreme being. This disciple believes that this is not the teaching of the Buddha himself, but of his later interpreters. This is the chief doctrine that saps it of its vitality. They might with all consistency add one more negative to their system, viz., there is nothing else. There need not stop to ask who is making these negations, for there is no one to make them. It is a practical certainty that the original Buddha never intended to convey any such ideas. He was making the most strenuous efforts to overcome the obtrusive ego everywhere so obnoxiously present, and to teach the oneness of all life. His followers, even to this day, have been unable to reconcile the idea of divine oneness with the existence of the individual soul. But it presents no serious difficulty. A single organ or a single cell may exist in the human body, and yet that is not inconsistent with the oneness of the entire body. Millions of fish exist in the sea and cannot live outside of it, and yet that does not offer any difficulty as to the inseparable oneness of the ocean and the individual fish. In him we live and move and have our being. Besides, if they had known the sound current, they would have had the perfect key to this oneness, to the existence of all souls as parts of the Supreme One. Here is the Divine Trinity, the Supreme One, the individual soul, and the sound current connecting the two and unifying them. They are one substance, and the souls have no existence apart from the Supreme One, and yet they have their own individuality. Each is merged into the divine whole, and yet each one remains a self-conscious unit of that divine whole. How much better this is than that cold and cheerless theorem which says there is no soul, nothing but a bundle of accumulated tendencies called skandhas. How this could ever have imagined itself to be a soul is not explained. How it could ever get the idea of a soul, if no soul existed, and no one existed to do the thinking, is a mystery which its advocates have never clarified. It is an idea like the chill blasts of winter. It takes life, but gives none. Cannot sin. Another fact most astonishing to the student is to be noted here, and then we shall proceed with a brief statement of the cardinal teachings of the Masters. That fact is this: when a student has reached a certain degree of advancement on this path, he simply cannot commit a sin. Not that the power to commit sin is taken from him, for he has vastly more power and freedom of choice than he ever had before, but he can now see the destructive nature and disastrous results of sin so clearly and in all of its ramifications that for him the act of sin would be equivalent to deliberate suicide. It is utterly unthinkable to him. If this is not a very practical result, then it would be difficult to imagine one that is practical. That alone would appear to be worth all the strenuous effort required on this path. There is no more sublime achievement on these lower planes, and with it the happiness of the student is so extraordinarily increased that the man of the world can form no conception of the vast treasure that is his. All the world is looking for happiness, but they are seeking it by the wrong method. They have never found it that way, and they never will. Happiness cannot be found in material enjoyments, not in the gratification of the senses, nor even in the satisfaction of the mind. The pleasures of sense are but for a moment, and are usually disappointing and fleeting. We no more than get settled in some situation from which we expect happiness, when it changes in substance or vanishes entirely, leaving us but a dream, a shadow. The whole world is a passing show, and its allurements only lead us on toward some vanishing mirage. At the end of the trail, we leave our bones to bleach on the desert sands. In exchange for its momentary pleasures, the world forges around us fresh chains of slavery, and then we go on, dragging our chains with us. But the spiritual science of the Masters offers freedom, everlasting freedom and joy beyond compare. How old forms persist. It has always been a mystery how and why men hold on so tenaciously to old religious forms and concepts. It makes no difference if they contain not the least shred of common sense or fact. Yet once accepted, it seems almost impossible to turn them loose. But in offering to the reader a statement of Santmat, let me urge that for the time being at least, he should try to divest himself of all prejudice and assume an attitude of open-minded inquiry. Shut not the door of truth in your own face by assuming in advance that you cannot learn anything new. To most of us, there are yet many things in heaven and on earth not dreamed of in our philosophy. Neither should we be over-concerned to find that which supports our own theories or creeds. We should look always for the truth, regardless of any man's theory. When you have given this statement due consideration, then if you do not like it, no matter, let it go. You have at least been fair to both yourself and the writer. If the time comes when students of religious subjects find that they have discovered something which carries them a step further toward the great light, then they may relax their hold on the old and take up the new. But this they should do, not as if they were casting aside something false and worthless, but they should lay it aside reverently as something which has well served its purpose, even as the growing child lays aside his primer when he advances to higher grades. For this also is in line with evolution. The comprehension of spiritual truth must always be progressive, the light increasing as individuals rise to higher levels of spiritual consciousness. The name Radha Soami. It has been said that this system has no name, and in fact it has none, but it was inevitable that some sort of cognomen or designation or label should become attached to it. Many insist on calling it a faith, and so the name Radha Soami Faith became attached to it. But the term faith is somewhat misleading, since this system does not fall in the category of faiths or religions as they are commonly understood. And the name Radha Soami was not given to it by its founder. It was given by Rai Saligram, one of the chief disciples of Swamiji. But it finally had the approval of the great master. This name later came to be applied to the founder and then to the system itself. The name has been applied to the Supreme Lord, but this name is Vanatmak, that which can be spoken or written, while the true name, Naam or Shabad, is Dunatmak, cannot be spoken or written. The true sovereign of all remains forever nameless, Anammi, for he is above and beyond all names or descriptions in words of mortal tongue. It was never intended to found a new sect or cult, and this system was not first taught by Swamiji, as some believe. He gave it clearer and simpler expression than anyone else had ever done, and he made the exercises plain and easy to follow. For this reason only, he is regarded as the founder of the system. He began publicly to expound the system in Agra, India, in 1861, but the teaching itself is the oldest science on earth, antedating the Vedas by untold ages or any other teaching known to history. It should be said that while saints of all ages have taught and practiced this system, it was not without reason that they did not give it out in plain words to the whole world. Each one had to be governed by the circumstances and the times in which he lived. It has been only in very recent years that the heavy hand of fanatical persecution has been lifted so that the saints became free to teach openly. Civilization has at last wrested from the priesthood that power which for so many ages blocked the progress of enlightenment. Sant Mat, millions of years old. The teaching of the saints has been one and the same system since the first saint ever set foot upon this planet. It has never changed, and it can never change, because it has been a perfect science from the beginning, instituted and practiced by perfected men who never make mistakes. It is a science based upon natural law and personal experience. The Creator himself is its author and founder. But in quite recent years, the saints known to history, such as Kabir Sahib, Tulsi Das, Shams Tabriz, Mullah Rum, and Guru Nanak, together with his successors, have been the chief exponents of the system. Then came Tulsi Sahib, and finally Shiv Dayal Singh Ji, later known as Radha Soami or Swamiji, who simplified the science and presented it to the world in practical form for the larger numbers who were approaching readiness for it. For this reason, he is generally regarded as founder and first exponent. This system calls for no credulity. While it sets forth some very startling statements, it asks no blind acceptance, but proposes a method by which the student may prove every word of it for himself. It offers the student nothing to be believed without evidence, and it asks no favours of any man. It never begs for money for its support, and even the master himself, giving his whole time to the work, never accepts any material benefits from his disciples. Sant Mat is not another cultural religion or philosophy. We may truly say that it is not primarily concerned with any system of right living on this earth. The field of its action lies in another direction. If a man is going to build a splendid dwelling for himself, he will not think only of the foundation, and when he has finished that foundation, stop right there and go on talking the rest of his life about that beautiful foundation. But that is precisely what all religions do. They lay a beautiful foundation of moral precept and culture, but they stop right there. They do not build upon the foundation which they have laid. Therein is their fatal weakness. Sant Mat, however, builds upon its foundation. It builds a superstructure reaching to the utmost skies, and its culture is that which is gained by the ascent of the soul to higher regions. That is the highest and noblest culture possible to man. It is a culture quite unknown to the man of the world, and it is almost impossible to put into writing anything that would convey a correct estimate of it. It is a priceless treasure, quite beyond the grasp of those who have not had the experience. But with all modern presentations of ethics and cultural standards, the saints are not directly concerned. Ethics is assumed by Sant Mat. It is the foundation upon which it builds its superstructure, but that foundation is already in the possession of mankind. There is no need that any saint should spend time restating it. He has more important work before him. All men know how to live correctly. If each one would act according to his own highest ideals, sin and crime would disappear, and righteousness would prevail the world over. The world is not in need of cultural ideals. It has them in great plenty. Let the reader here make special note of the fact that this writer does not mean to convey the idea that the masters are not interested in ethics or moral culture. The reverse is true. They always teach and emphasize its vital importance. They are interested in ethics just as truly as any builder is interested in the foundation of his house. And their first lesson, given to disciples, is to impress upon them that they cannot make even a start on the path until the moral foundation has been laid. But unlike other systems, they do not stop there. Having laid this foundation, they proceed to build upon it. Consequently, while ethics is vital in their system, at the same time it is not the chief interest of the masters, and they spend only the minimum amount of time on it necessary to impress its importance upon the student. The superstructure or spiritual character and achievement is their chief concern. It is quite true that no one can take the first step on the path of a saint unless and until he has established his life upon a broad and sound ethical foundation. He is simply told that this is his first step. It is the one primary prerequisite, but he knows already how to do it. He is quite familiar with its principles. All of this being taken for granted, the saint has now to point out the path of attainment. That is his mission. He is not so much concerned with fitting men to live upon this earth or the establishment of a moral order here, as he is in liberating men utterly and forever from the confines of this earth life. That is the supreme mission of the saints, and to that they give all attention. Essential teachings of Sant. I have mentioned a number of things which this system is not. Let us now endeavour to see what it really is. The great saint at Beas has defined it in these words. Sant is the science of connecting the individual soul with its creator. This definition is extremely expressive and very accurate. It assumes that the ordinary individual is disconnected from his creator. Its primary concern, then, is to re-establish that divine yoga or oneness, which in a real sense is the aim of all religions, although they have not the slightest idea how to go about it. A reunion with God is the fundamental aim of all spiritual aspiration. It is the one purpose behind all religious teaching and ceremony. But the pity is that they have all lost the method by which that reunion is to be accomplished. It has been lost and covered up in the maze of creeds and ceremonies and external forms. And although the world is piled high with books and swarming with priests, all purporting to teach the way, yet they actually do not know the first step on the path. Those who follow them only become worse and worse entangled in the maze, and there is no escape until they look to a real master. Souls disconnected from the Creator. It is assumed, then, that the individual is disconnected from his Creator. Each one comes into this world so disconnected. He runs on for a time only by the momentum with which he came, and then he slows down and dies miserably from lack of power. During the ages that he has been wandering about the regions of mind and coarser matter, he has become separated from the great central dynamo. He is now like a motor car from which the battery has been disconnected. There is no longer any spark to ignite the fuel and produce the needed power to run on independently. It is just here that Sant lays down the science by means of which the battery is reconnected and power made available for independent achievement. You may see at a glance that this is not and cannot be a system of beliefs. It is no mere theory. It is not a matter of opinions. It is not a cultural philosophy. Culture, beliefs, opinions could never connect the disconnected battery. It requires a very definite act from the hand of an expert, a concrete, definite act. Only when the hand of the master mechanic comes and lays hold of the apparatus and actually makes the connection, then and then only will the motor come to life. And the master mechanic works by strictly scientific principles and from exact knowledge. His is a science in the strict and technical meaning of the term. It is so because it is based upon natural law, and its rules and principles of operation are universal. In all ages of the world, among all races and in all countries, all who follow its formula get exactly the same results. That makes it an exact science. Therefore, the results may always be predicted in advance. The student on this path may always know exactly what he will be able to accomplish. He may not know just how long it will take him, for many individual factors enter here, as in all other lines of endeavour. But if he follows the formula faithfully, he may rest assured of the final results with no shadow of variation and no possibility of failure. 3 Great Truths of Sant. There are 3 great fundamental truths lying at the base of this system, and to each of these I wish to direct attention for a moment. First, the helpless condition of the individual soul. I mean by this the utter inability of the individual ever to extricate himself from the prison walls and multiform chains that bind and hold him in this world of mind and matter, and in which he is doomed to be born and reborn for untold ages. He has wandered far from the regions of light, his original home. It would appear that he has been sent down here to learn self-control, in fact, that he might really finish the work of creating himself through individual struggle. He is encompassed by adverse conditions, requiring painful, prolonged, and exhausting effort. These conditions are needed to supply the urge force to struggle. If conditions were pleasant, he would just sit down and take things easy for 100,000 years. But after he has fought the battle to the limit, when he has done his best to rise above the region of pain and struggle, he stands alone upon a lofty eminence and surveys the field of his struggles. He looks for a way to escape, but there is none. Let him struggle as he may, he must return again and again to the theatre of struggle. But if he is brave and continues to fight, on each successive return to the plane of struggle, he brings with him an earned increment of favourable karma, giving him a better placement. At last, he looks about him and is seized with an inexpressible yearning to return to his original home. He is tired of this endless warfare. The million entanglements of this world of senses are galling to him. He prays earnestly for his freedom. He finds that he has struggled so long and so hard, but has never been able to extricate himself from the wheel. He recalls that he has tried every scheme, but all to no avail. He now knows intuitively that he never can release himself. So when his ego has been conquered, when humility is born of bitter experiences, he is ready for the second great truth of this science. It is this: the living master is the divinely appointed agent of individual salvation. The Master, the Great Liberator. As said before, the individual has been disconnected from the great central force which alone can enable him to regain his lost position and return to his original home. He is quite unable to effect his own release. But now comes the Master into his life. The Master always comes when the soul is ready for him. When all else has failed him, and his ego has subsided sufficiently to permit him to accept the Master, the moment is ripe for the great liberator to enter his life. The Master then connects the individual soul with his Creator. That is his first step. He is the master mechanic whose skilled hands are able to connect the battery and give life to the motor once more. In this particular instance, the machinery is far too complicated and delicate for the ordinary traveller to know what he is doing with it. When the connection is made, he has power to travel independently. He then has the power to overcome the downward pull of earth and to begin his ascent toward the regions of light where lies his eternal home. But without the aid of the Master, he could never make that journey. He could never even begin it. This, then, is the second great truth emphasized by all the saints, the fact that there is no ultimate release for anyone from the wheel of birth and death, from the regions of pain and struggle, until the Master comes to his aid. The Shabad or sound current. The third great truth of Sant Mat is the gigantic and vital fact of the sound current. This science is sometimes called the practice of the sound current. It is also called the yoga of the sound current, or Anand Yoga. The sound current is the most stupendous and vital fact in all the realms of nature, yet it has been almost entirely lost sight of by the majority of modern students. For more than 50 years, this student diligently searched through everything printed in books to the limit of his ability. He ransacked the libraries of the world in different languages, eagerly looking for gleams of truth, but never once did he run across a single intelligible word concerning the sound current until less than 4 years ago. Yet the teaching of the sound current has been in the world since the earliest man began to turn his eyes heavenward, since the Great Father started the human race on its career upon this planet. Time and again, age after age, saints have come to give fresh emphasis to this great truth. This is the most important of all truths. But soon after their departure, the negative powers begin to cover it up and to obscure it, introducing 1,000 schemes to draw attention away from it. Why? Because it is the one and only way or avenue of escape from the regions of the negative power. It is the one and only power by means of which man is enabled to break every fetter that binds him and remove every evil that obscures his moral sense or clouds his spiritual vision. It is the one source of help that meets every need of the soul, and it is the open chariot in which he may ride back to his eternal home at the feet of the Supreme Father. What, then, is the sound current? It may not be so easy to define it. It is called sound current because it can be heard. It may be assumed that every force in the universe, moving from a static condition to dynamic expression, is in a state of vibration and therefore produces sound. Sound is not limited to atmospheric vibrations, although our physical ear is so limited. When music is transmitted by a radio across the continent in the fraction of a second, it is just as truly a sound current or sound wave, if you prefer that expression, while it is in transit, as it is when again converted into atmospheric vibrations by the receiving instrument. Only it cannot be heard by the physical ear. But a finer ear, so constructed as to respond to those higher vibrations, might easily pick up those electromagnetic waves without any other instrument. And that is exactly what happens when the finer ear of the astral body, and also of the still finer body, or bodies with which man is already endowed, actually picks up the finer vibrations of the sound current. It only requires the proper training of the master to enable the student to accomplish this marvellous achievement. Sound current mentioned by Jesus. It may be of interest to the student brought up in the Christian faith to know that Jesus himself, at least in one place in the New Testament, very definitely mentions the fact that this sound current is to be heard. In the Gospel of John, 1st chapter, it is called the Logos, or Word, through which all creation came into existence. It was not only with God from the beginning, but it was God himself. Then in the 3rd to 8th verses of chapter 3, Jesus himself speaks of contacting the sound current and compares it to a new or second birth. Bear in mind that birth means bringing to light. He says that which is born of the flesh is flesh, but it is the spirit of man which is born of the Spirit, that is, brought to light by the Spirit. In the 8th verse, he clearly mentions actually hearing the sound of this same spirit current which gives the new birth. He says, "The wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh, and whither it goeth. So is every one who is born of the Spirit." Thus the matter is made very clear and definite, that just as the body of man is born of woman, body from body, so the spirit of man is born, brought to light, out of the dark womb of matter and its foul corruptions, through the action of the divine Spirit, in the form of the sound current. When that takes place, he actually hears the sound of it, just as distinctly as he may hear the rustle of the wind in the tall pines of the forest. But no one can tell whence that inner sound comes, any more than he can tell whence the wind is blowing. Shams Tabriz, a great Persian saint, speaking of the sound current, says very beautifully, "To me came the sound incomparable, which comes neither from within nor from without, neither does it come from the left, nor from the right, nor from the back, nor from the front. You will ask then, whence does it come? It comes from the direction you are seeking to go. You will ask then, which way shall I face? The side from which the bridegroom cometh, that direction from which the parched fish comes to life with the waters of immortality, that direction whence the hand of Moses became bright like the shining moon, the direction whence ripeness comes to fruit, the direction from which stones become diamonds. Be silent and listen to the 5 sounds from heaven, the heaven which is beyond all senses and directions." Every moment of life, this wondrous sound reaches down from the courts of heaven. Fortunate above all the children of men is he who hears its enchanting melodies. Jesus, speaking in the same poetical spirit of this sound current, says it is heard in the direction whence the wind blows. And he also says, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven. He must be brought to light, and that light is inside of man himself. And for this very definite reason, he says that the kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of heaven being inside, of course, it can be seen only by going inside. And yet all the world is busy seeking it everywhere else. To make the momentous discovery of the great kingdom of light, man must go inside, and he cannot go inside except by the aid of the sound current. Hence its vital importance. In every age of the world, time and time again, the saints have emphasized that one must be born anew. In the words of Jesus, Marvel not that I say unto you, ye must be born again. When the soul is connected with the sound current, at the time of the disciples' initiation by the Master, that is the supreme moment of his new birth. But the completion of that birth is a slow process, a gradual coming into the light. The Master often refers to the birth of the soul into this world of matter as a death rather than a birth, for it is in fact a going down into darkness. But the real birth takes place when he is connected with the sound current, and by its regenerating action is brought into light. Sound and power through the divine Shabad. This divine Shabad, which means word or sound, may be called the current of the Supreme Being himself, vibrating through all space and extending down to each individual soul. Now it has been proved that not only sound can be transmitted by radio, but also power can be so transmitted. In like manner, the power of the supreme current can be transmitted to the individual soul who is attuned to receive it. And here is the crux of the whole matter. One must be attuned to receive it. This is the primal connection between the Creator and the created. But the entire process of training to receive both the sound and the power constitutes the course of instructions and exercises given by each master to his initiates. In this manner, the Creator himself sends out streams of life to the untold millions of beings who are dependent upon him. These streams reach to the outer bounds of all creation. It is the supreme current of spiritual life, the very essence of life flowing out from the Creator to every soul in the universe. It is the way he will ultimately bring them back to himself when their periods of separation are over. This current then vibrates through all space and into each soul. Anywhere a receiving set is put into operation, it will pick up the currents or waves which may be said to fill all space. In like manner, any soul, when properly prepared, may pick up this divine sound current and receive its power. But men have shut themselves off from vital connection with it. It is a living, vibrant force, and can be heard, and its power can be felt. But first, each one must be connected with that current by the master mechanic, the saint. It is largely a process of tuning in, as we say in radio, but only the master knows how to do that tuning in, and no man can tune himself in consequence of man's degrading relations with these lower regions. He has become so disconnected, out of tune, that he can no longer hear the vibrations of that current or avail himself of its power until the master reconnects him. This the master does at the time of initiation, and from that time on, the disciple has only to train himself in that system of scientific yoga as prescribed by the master, and sooner or later he is enabled to distinctly hear the sound current within himself. It is at first feeble and makes but little impression upon the student, but gradually, as his concentration becomes more perfect, the sound grows more distinct and sweeter in tone, until at length it is the most delightful musical note ever heard by mortal man. It enchants and transforms him, and by its power he easily overcomes all temptations. It gives him new strength and resolution. It literally draws him upward, and at the same time it cleanses him of all earthly impurities. It fairly recreates him. Under its benign influence, he begins his inward and upward journey toward the highest spiritual regions. There are 5 principal regions through which he passes on this journey. These regions are gained by inward concentration, first enabling the spirit to leave the physical body and then to travel abroad in those exalted and shining worlds. These he traverses one after the other until the highest is reached, the master being all the while his gracious companion and guide. The last of these regions is in the highest grand division of creation, the realm of pure spirit, the home of the Supreme Father. In those far realms of glory, so immeasurably beyond the power of human words to describe, dwells the Supreme Father of all, himself formless and boundless, an infinite ocean of love. Yet he takes forms, many forms, visible to his children, fitting himself to their needs in order that he may carry out his purposes of an all-embracing love. This is the ultimate home of the soul. Thus the master and the sound current are the 2 vital factors in the process of spiritual redemption, in fact, in all real achievement. Without them both, the individual soul is utterly helpless and is doomed to wander forever up and down the desolate plains of shadow and pain, of struggle and death. The soul who has not a master is indeed poor, though he may possess all the gold of the world. Even though he may be the emperor upon whose broad domains the sun never goes down, yet he is poorer than the lowest labourer who has a master. These points are so vital and all-important, I am going to try to illustrate them a little further. To do that, permit me to use the analogy of an airplane and to recite a personal experience. In that we shall find a very apt illustration of all 3 of these great truths of Sant Mat. A dead motor over mountain ranges. I used to do considerable flying. I had some airplanes of my own and gained a little skill in flying them. On one occasion, I was crossing the Siskiyou mountain range in Northern California, sailing along at an altitude of almost 2 miles above sea level. Those snow-covered summits and deep gorges, gigantic rocks and vast forests, all lay unrolling beneath me in a gorgeous panorama. Old Mount Shasta stood out to my left, and its 12,000-foot peak I could almost have touched if my arm had been a little longer. Here and there, miles of billowy clouds crept lazily along the mountainsides, far below me, shining white in the morning sun. I was enjoying the flight with superb delight. I felt almost as if I were floating through the sunlit skies, sustained by the everlasting arms. There was no thought of danger to myself. I was exultingly happy. Then all of a sudden, my motor went dead. No amount of coaxing could restore it to action. It was dead, hopelessly out. I looked around in every direction, but no place to land without a crash. Nothing, as far as I could see, nothing but rocks and deep gorges and dense forests. Only one thing was now certain. Beyond peradventure, I must soon come down to earth. Even the minutes allotted to me were counted, and only my gliding angle was left, 11 times the distance I was above the ground, and then I must come down to earth, whether I was ready or not. But how to make a satisfactory landing when there was no place to land? I continued to glide and look for an opening, or as the flyers say, an out. Miles went by under me, and all the while I was slowly but inevitably descending. The pull of gravity was as relentless as death itself, and held its victim as surely within its grasp. Finally, far to the east, perhaps 6 miles, I saw a field and headed for it. Shortly reaching it, I circled the field twice to pick out the best approach, skimmed over the tops of some trees, side-slipped her down to break the too rapid landing speed, and then set her down in that little field, none the worse for my dead motor. Now here is the point. The airplane is the human body. The pilot sitting in it is the soul. The motor is the master, and the gasoline from which all power is derived is the sound current. The mountain range, with its stony crag, its deep cuts, vast forests, and low rolling clouds, is this earth, the realm of matter. And my home, lying some 150 miles to the south, may represent our eternal home in Sachkhand. Let us now make the application, so that by all means we do not fail to get the fundamental ideas fixed in our consciousness. Presumably, I was headed for my home, but now, having no power to rise, because wholly disconnected from the source of power, and being utterly unable to continue the journey, I was slowly sinking toward the earth. This is an exact parallel to our situation spiritually. It pictures the situation of the whole world. Each one rises but for a moment above the horizon of life, spends that moment wasting the small store of energy he has acquired in former lives, and then slowly sinks to earth, to die and be reborn in an endless chain of cause and effect called karma. But there is one avenue of escape, and only one. If he is fortunate enough to meet a real master, he may find the way out. The master, like the motor in the plane, is the connecting link between the source of power and the individual soul. The source of power is the sound current, and it is in all men, like the gasoline in the tank of the plane, but it is latent. To us, it is practically useless because without the master, its power is not available. Just as the plane needs the motor to convert the latent power of the gasoline into dynamic energy, so the soul must have the master to connect it with the sound current and make its power available. This the master does when he gives the disciple initiation. From that moment on, the divine energy is available, whereas before it was latent and useless to the individual. As the plane begins to rise, the moment the power of the motor is applied, so the soul begins to rise the moment it is connected with the sound current by the master. But the man without a master is exactly like the airplane without a motor. The utmost that he can do is to glide, and that for only a limited time. Most of the human race are simply gliders, momentary gliders, drifters, nothing more. They have no independent motive power by which to rise. Now, the pilot in a motorless plane may have all the technical knowledge in the world. He may know how to build airplanes. He may be a master of all the sciences, yet as he sits there in that motorless plane, all he can do is glide a little way. Precisely the situation in which all men without a master find themselves, no matter how wise and learned they may be. Search the hearts of the wisest and best of men, and ask them if they have power to do as they please. They will tell you that they are helpless gliders, with power only to modify their gliding a little. In like manner, a man may have all the book learning in the world. He may have all the sciences of the world at his command. He may be able to quote verbatim every line of the Vedas, the Shastras, the Quran and the Bible, all of the sacred hymns and Bibles of the world, but that knowledge will never enable him to overcome the downward pull of earth's influences. Knowledge can save no one from Jurasida Chakra, the inevitable wheel of birth and death, called the Wheel of 84. Only dynamic power can do that, and dynamic power is not inherent in knowledge itself. Also, the pilot may be a model of moral perfection. He may be the most rigid of purists, the most punctilious of all in observing every moral precept, and he may spend all his days in prayers. Yet sitting there in that motorless plane, he is as helpless as the boldest scoundrel. So the man of moral perfection is likewise helpless when it comes to rising against the downward pull of earth's dominant forces, which lead him ultimately to death and rebirth. Without the master, he also is helpless. Again, the pilot may have all of the training and skill of a Lindbergh. He may be the most efficient and keenly intellectual pilot that ever sat in a plane, and yet without the power of the motor, he must come down to earth. The utmost that he can hope to do is to glide for a little season, and if he has favourable winds, he may stay up a little longer than the other fellow who has less favourable winds and less skill. But the winds of fortune blow not in the favour of all men. In the same way, a man may have attained the very acme of human culture. He may be a marvel of erudition. He may be the very flower of earth's super-refinement. He may contain within himself the combined mastership of all the fine arts. He may speak every known language. In a word, he may have reached the summit of all possible human culture and achievement, and yet all of that will never lift him above the downward pull of those currents which are an integral part of this earth life. With all of his erudition and culture, the utmost that he can hope to do, like the pilot in the motorless plane, is to drift along a little above the dark streams of earth's more sordid conditions. With the favourable winds of good fortune, he may glide on for a time, and at last all that his culture can do for him is help him pick out a more favourable landing from which to begin his next venture. But the landing he must take. He has no choice. He has no independent power to ascend the skies and go on to his real home. He must return to earth and begin his struggle all over again. The wheel of birth and death must roll on forever, and he must pass under it. He is hopelessly bound to these regions of mind and matter, of pain and struggle. But the soul, who has the help of a master, and he alone has the power to rise and free himself, to shake off the dust of earth forever and mount to his eternal home. From this illustration, it would appear that it does not lie in the power of any human being, high or low, ignorant or cultured, vile or saintly, to free himself from the bonds of earth and rise into the regions of light. And that is exactly what all of the saints teach. It is a fact of experience, not a theory, and it is fundamental in their system. The final triumph. But suppose that while that airplane is gliding along over the mountains, slowly descending for the inevitable landing, suppose that the motor suddenly springs to life again. Once more the power is applied to the propeller, and the throb of life is again felt through every wire and rib. To the tips of her wings, we begin to rise. Oh, the glory of it! Only those who have had the experience may ever know what joy the pilot feels when he hears again the blessed hum of that motor and feels his ship begin to climb once more. The earth drops away beneath him, and he triumphantly ascends the shining path of the skies. The old earth may now pull all she pleases, but there is a power within which is able to overcome the downward drag. So he climbs higher and higher, breathing the purer air of those upper regions, until at last he beholds his home on the distant horizon. Just so is the joy of him who begins to hear the sweet sounds of the divine current within, when he feels a new power throbbing through every fibre of his being. He is now conscious of rising above all downward tendencies, thrilled with a sense of well-being which he never knew before. His real home, in the land of pure spirit, is even now on the horizon, and soon his feet will step upon its golden sands. End of With a Great Master in India by Julian P. Johnson, M.A., M.D., print copyright 1934, 1982, 1994 and 2002, and audio recording copyright 2024. Radha Soami Satsang Beas, all rights reserved.